The story of Noah has endured through thousands of years of history. It crosses religious and cultural borders, retold everywhere, from sacred texts to ancient legends. But what makes it still live on in the minds of humanity? Is it because it was the first story of destruction and rebirth? A warning against downfall, yet also a hymn of hope in the night. The ark is not just a structure of wood. It is a symbol of faith, salvation, and divine covenant. And today, we return to that journey to discover, why does Noah still endure? In the post-Adamic age, after many generations, the earth was no longer a place of light. Mankind had been cast out of Eden, and since then, they drifted far from God. Instead of seeking righteousness, they pursued violence, lust, and evil spirits. The earth was filled with violence, and every thought in man's heart was evil continually. Cries for help no longer reached heaven, for people had ceased to pray. In a world of violence and chaos, Noah was the only righteous man. While others lived according to lust and sin, he lived by God's word. Noah was not just a righteous man, he was a preacher of righteousness. His faith remained unshaken, believing in God's promise. No matter how the world outside changed, Noah faithfully followed God's will. The world had fallen into darkness, and God, in His mercy, chose to act. He saw the corruption, the violence, the lost hearts, and yet He still found Noah. To Noah, He gave a command: build a great ark, a sanctuary of salvation, not only for himself, but for every kind of living creature and for a future still unseen. Noah believed in God's word and began this monumental task. Noah did not argue, he did not hesitate, he trusted and obeyed. God gave the design. Noah gave his life to fulfill it. Immediately, he ran to inform the villagers about the impending great flood and God's command to build the ark. However, in the dry desert, no one believed his words. They mocked him, ridiculing him, thinking he was delusional. Despite being scorned and laughed at, he remained unwavering because, in his heart, he knew for certain that God's word would never be wrong. No one knew when the rain would come, but Noah kept building because he had heard the voice. The first blow of Noah's hammer echoed through the valley like thunder, but it was met with laughter. They called him mad, delusional, a fool chasing rain in a desert sky. Every day Noah rose before the sun and worked as shadows of doubt crept around him. He worked alone, he worked in silence, he worked with heaven watching. His sons began to help, but even they bore the shame of public ridicule, and yet, plank by plank, the ark began to rise, a monument to faith carved in defiance of mockery. He did not respond with words. His answer was in every beam he lifted, every nail he drove. The world saw madness. God saw obedience. And that obedience would one day float above every mocking voice. It began with the sky, once blue, now swirling with strange colors and low groans of thunder. The wind changed its song. It no longer danced through trees, it howled across barren fields. Birds stopped singing, insects vanished, Even the animals sensed something was wrong. Then it came, the first drop, silent, cold, heavy like judgment, then another and another, until the sky wept as if heaven mourned the earth. Noah looked to the sky, not in fear, but in confirmation. The signs were here. What God spoke was now unfolding. Nature obeys faster than man does. It trembled before the holy. And so the warning was clear, not in words, but in wind, sky, and storm. Then the heavens broke open, not gently, but with force, like a dam bursting from the soul of the sky. Rain came down in sheets, thick and endless, as if the sky itself wept uncontrollably. The earth responded. Waters surged from beneath, swallowing fields, homes, and towers. Noah stood at the ark's door, watching the last of the animals enter, 2 by 2, drawn by something deeper than instinct. Then God shut the door. Not Noah. God sealed them in. Outside, panic, screaming, then silence, swallowed by the rising tide. Everything perished, but inside the ark, life endured. That wooden vessel became the last cradle of creation. In judgment, God remembered mercy, and in mercy, He preserved a future. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Still the rain stopped, and a hush fell upon the world. Noah looked out through the tiny window. There was no land, only horizon and waiting. The ark drifted in sacred silence like a whisper between heaven and earth. Inside, patience was tested, faith stretched, hope kept them breathing. It was not yet a new world, but it was no longer the old one. Then dry land. A dove returned with an olive leaf, then again, and did not return. Noah opened the ark, and fresh air rushed in, the smell of earth, the sound of silence. He stepped out, not into Eden, but into possibility. Then came the covenant. A rainbow stretched across the sky like a divine signature. God promised never again, not by flood, not by wrath, the earth would have a future. The covenant was not just with Noah, it was with generations unborn. The rainbow was not just a beautiful arc of light, but it carried a powerful message from God. It was a promise, an everlasting covenant. God had sworn never again to destroy the world with a flood. The rainbow, like a signature from heaven, was a sign of the covenant, a symbol of His boundless love and mercy for humankind. When God spoke to Noah, He did not offer proof, He gave a command. Build an ark, He said, a vessel large enough to save life itself. At that time, the earth had never seen rain like what was coming. Noah's obedience was not about understanding, it was about surrender. He did not delay. He did not demand an explanation. He simply obeyed. To those around him, he was a fool, building a boat in dry land. But to God, he was righteous, a man who trusted the voice of heaven above the voice of man. Obedience is often ridiculed in a world that celebrates rebellion. But it is obedience that builds the future, plank by plank, prayer by prayer. Even today, obedience remains countercultural and yet deeply powerful. Obedience often doesn't make headlines. It doesn't always get applause. But in the quiet corners of life, it shapes destinies. Imagine a nurse choosing to serve in an outbreak zone, a teacher refusing to alter grades, a young man choosing purity in a world that praises indulgence. All these are echoes of Noah's obedience, simple, unshaken, and faithful. They remind us that when we obey with trust, we step into the will of God. Noah did not know the full plan, but he trusted the one who did. And because he obeyed, he became part of something that would change history. The ark didn't just float on water, it floated on obedience. Obedience is what kept it steady through the storm. When we obey today, we are building something that can outlast the flood. Faith does not bloom in certainty. It grows in drought, in silence, in darkness. Noah was told of a flood when there was no rain. He spent decades building a vessel of hope while the world mocked his faith. Faith is not proven by comfort, it is proven by perseverance. Noah continued day after day with no sign that the warning would come true. The people laughed not because they knew better, but because they had no faith. Today, faith is still tested, not by floods, but by fear, uncertainty, and waiting. Example: parents raising children in war zones, believing in peace, farmers planting seeds during a drought, trusting in rain. Faith lives not just in churches, but in small kitchens, lonely hospital beds, and prison cells. It whispers, "Hold on," when all else screams, "Let go." Noah's faith was a lighthouse in the fog of doubt. It kept him steady when logic failed and storms raged. Faith is a quiet defiance against despair. It says, "I believe," even when nothing makes sense. And it is that kind of faith that God honors. Noah's story teaches us to keep building, keep trusting, keep hoping, even when skies are clear and laughter surrounds us, because faith sees what the eye cannot. And in the end, it is faith that carries the ark through the rain. Faith is the quiet voice that whispers, "Keep going," when the world shouts, "Give up." Noah's story is not one of instant miracles. It is the story of a man who waited through ridicule, through dry seasons, through unanswered prayers. He waited while building something the world didn't believe in, because God had spoken. Faith is not flashy. It does not demand attention. It is steady hands cutting timber, tired arms lifting beams, eyes fixed on a promise unseen. It is the endurance of a soul that holds on to God's word when logic says otherwise. And every generation since has needed that kind of faith. From the early church to the underground believers in forbidden lands. From reformers who stood against empires to parents who choose forgiveness over revenge. Noah's faith is a pattern, a reminder that God often moves slowly, but always surely. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is the courage to move forward in spite of it. The Great Flood was not a random act of destruction. It was a divine reset. It was not born from rage, but from sorrow. God's heart broke over what his creation had become. Violence was the norm. Innocence was extinct. The earth groaned under the weight of sin, and so judgment came, not as a punishment, but as a painful mercy, to stop the spread of corruption, to preserve what was still good. We cannot read this story without feeling the gravity of justice. It is a justice that doesn't ignore evil, but meets it with holy resolve. And yet, within the storm, God prepared an ark, a way out, a path through wrath toward restoration. Even now, we see shadows of this in our world, in courtrooms where truth finally prevails, in truth-tellers who refuse to be silenced, in broken societies rediscovering what is right and sacred. Justice is not the enemy of grace, it is its foundation. To walk with God in a crooked world is a rebellion of holiness. Noah's life was an act of protest against the darkness. He did not shout. He did not wage war. He simply lived differently, and sometimes that is the loudest sermon. He built a family anchored in truth, while others traded morality for convenience. He honored God's word when others forgot it. He stayed clean when everyone else got dirty. Today, such lives are still needed. Not perfect lives, but persistent ones. People who say no to dishonesty, even when it costs them a promotion. Young people who choose purity when everyone else chases pleasure. Leaders who choose integrity when the system rewards deceit. These are the modern Noahs, righteous anchors in corrupt seas. We underestimate what Noah endured, not just the work, but the waiting. Waiting for results, waiting for rain, waiting for vindication. But patience is not passive. It is an act of resistance. Resistance against despair, resistance against the easy way out. Every hammer strike was a declaration, I still believe. Every board fitted to another was an act of sacred defiance. He was building something bigger than a boat. He was building a testimony. And when the first drops fell, and the door shut, and the ark began to rise, he knew it had all been worth it. Let this be a call to every tired soul building something in faith. Keep hammering, keep hoping the rain will come, and so will the promise. He held on to the word spoken in silence, a word others dismissed, but he carried like fire in his bones. Every morning, as he woke to the hammer and saw, he was not just building a vessel, he was building a testimony. His children saw him labor not just with hands, but with hope. And though they may have wondered, they followed, because faith, when lived, speaks louder than words. This was not blind faith. It was faith with eyes wide open, staring into a world that doubted and choosing to believe anyway. In many ways, Noah was alone, but he was never forsaken. God walked with him silently through the decades. Faith doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a whisper in the storm, a steady step in a shaken world. Today, we need that faith again, not in a flood, but in a world flooded with fear, not in wood and pitch, but in daily obedience. Faith to forgive when it's easier to hate. Faith to pray when no one listens. Faith to keep going even when the end isn't in sight. Faith is not outdated, it's eternal. And like Noah, those who live by it shape the future, one act of trust at a time. Justice can be hard to understand when it comes in waves. To some, the flood might seem cruel, but to a world drowning in evil, it was necessary. Not all destruction is blind rage. Sometimes it is holy cleansing. The ark was not just a boat. It was a boundary between death and mercy. As the rain fell, so did the illusions of safety and sin. And in that storm, the world was reminded that there is a limit to divine patience. But even then, God's justice was wrapped in purpose. The rainbow, the survivors, the new beginning, all of it proved that judgment was not the end of the story. Today, we long for justice in broken courts, in divided nations, in aching hearts. And the story of the flood tells us justice will come, but it will come with mercy. We are not forgotten. The judge of all the earth still does right. Noah's integrity was not inherited. It was chosen. In a world where every heart was corrupt, he chose purity. He stood when others bowed. He gave when others took. He worshiped when others cursed. That kind of righteousness is not accidental. It's deliberate. It is forged in the secret place, in decisions no one sees. Noah's righteousness wasn't loud, but it was loud enough for heaven to notice. He walked with God, and in walking with God, he walked apart from the world. Today, the challenge remains. Who will stand when compromise is easier? Who will be light when darkness wins the crowd? Noah's story invites us not to be famous, but to be faithful. Because in the end, it wasn't popularity that saved his family, it was righteousness. The ark wasn't just a task, it was a marathon. Every beam he lifted, every nail he drove was a testament to endurance. Some days, his hands bled. Some nights, his heart ached. But he did not stop. He didn't need applause. He had assurance. He didn't need to see the rain. He believed the word. Real perseverance is not glamorous. It's gritty. It wakes up tired. It works unnoticed. It rests in God. Noah didn't know when the flood would come, but he knew who had spoken. So he built, and he trusted. That's the kind of perseverance that changes history. As the days grew longer and the rain unceasing, fear could have taken hold. But hope held the ark afloat. Hope that there would be land again. Hope that the sky would clear. Hope that the voice who warned was also the voice who would restore. In the dark, they sang. In the waiting, they prayed. And every creak of the ark was a reminder they were not abandoned. Hope does not eliminate the storm, but it outlasts it. And when all seemed lost, a dove returned. The olive branch was more than a leaf. It was a promise, a sign that life had survived, that roots still reached deep, that trees still stood. It was God's way of saying, I haven't forgotten you. Sometimes all we need is a small sign to remember God's faithfulness. The olive branch was small, but it turned despair into joy. And today, in our own storms, God still sends signs. The rainbow broke through the clouds like a shout of grace, a symbol stretched across the sky, bridging judgment and joy. It was more than light and color. It was a divine signature. God was saying, never again, not because sin had vanished, but because mercy had triumphed. That covenant wasn't just for Noah, it was for us. A reminder that God is not only a God of justice, but of enduring promise. So every time we see the rainbow, we remember storms don't last forever, but God's promise does. The story of Noah does not end with the drying of the earth or the rainbow in the sky. It continues, carried through time, echoing in every heart that dares to believe. The ark, once a physical vessel, now sails as a symbol through generations. It is no longer just wood and pitch, but memory, meaning, and mission. Noah's Ark is not just history. It is a living metaphor. It is the reminder that one righteous act, one faithful heart, can alter the course of humanity. The Ark became the first sanctuary, the first church without walls, a floating altar of obedience. Each beam was laid with trust, each nail driven with hope. Its construction was not only a feat of labor, but a liturgy of faith. This is the sacred legacy of Noah, not merely survival, but transformation. In ancient scrolls and whispered prayers, the Ark still lives. In moments of crisis and storms of doubt, people remember there is always a place of refuge. When the flood waters of life rise, the memory of Noah calls us home. He did not build for fame, he built for faith. He did not save himself alone. He saved the possibility of life itself. And in doing so, he left us a blueprint, not for a ship, but for salvation. Today, every act of moral courage echoes the hammer strikes of Noah's hands. Every refusal to give in to despair is a plank placed in a modern ark. When truth is spoken in love, when compassion is shown to a stranger, when justice is defended against the tide of corruption, the ark sails again. It sails not on water, but on conviction. It moves not by waves, but by faith. From war zones to classrooms, from homes to pulpits, the spirit of Noah's Ark lives on. It lives in every heart that chooses righteousness when the world chooses wrong. The rainbow was not just a promise to the skies, it was a covenant to our souls. God's faithfulness did not end at Ararat. It renews every day in every generation. The Ark teaches us that storms will come, but they will also pass. And when they do, if we have held fast to truth, we too will stand on new ground. We too will see the sky open. We too will witness the light breaking through the clouds. Because the legacy of Noah is not about an ancient flood. It is about eternal faith. And the ark is not behind us. It is within us. Building trust. Endure.
Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. See you in the next video.